All right, guys, welcome back to Confessions of a Lost Soul. I'm your host, Christopher James. Not that that's really as important as the message and what we want to talk about today. You know, there's a lot to unpack, and there's so many different directions and things I want to do. But, today on this episode, I just want to talk about what am I doing about loneliness because just like probably you at home, I'm lost. I'm lonely at times, more times than I wish to admit sometimes. And how am I going to navigate it? And that kind of just snowballs into feeling lost and questioning a lot of things. So let's unpack it. So, yeah, I am totally gonna first and foremost admit I am not an expert at this. I am really just one of those fake it till you make it type of people. So when I decided to start this podcast, I, of course, did a little bit of research, knew, at least get a good microphone and kind of go from there. But other than that, I just knew I wanted these to be my confessions, my failures, hopefully some of my successes as well, and really just talking to you and kind of navigating this together. So we really are winging it. And I do always write down kind of just like the big picture points. I mean, those of you who are, either professionals or semi professionals or amateurs and just way better at podcasting than me probably are sitting there thinking, well, that's common sense. But to me, again, I'm winging it. So I was like, let me write down some of my big points that I really want to get across. Because if I don't, I'll finish this and then be like, oh, damn, I wish I said that. So anyway, let's get into this. So, this episode is really about me confessing, what am I doing about my loneliness? And there's a lot of things that I'm trying to do. I think a big thing is I've been reading this book. I don't know if anyone has read it, by Mark Hansen, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And I'm hooked. The book is about, I don't have it on me right now. That'd be smart. But it's about like 190 pages of pure gold. And what I love and the big thing that I've taken from it is where he is like, just do it. We can think and feel and question and self-doubt, but then we will just be stuck there. And on the flip side, just do it. Honestly, don't give a shit and just do it. And who cares if you fail? Like me doing this podcast, I finally decided I am going to sit down with a microphone in front of me and I'm just going to do it. I am going to start talking. I am going to start rambling and I'm going to see what happens. Because you know what? If I'm craving human connection and if I'm trying to navigate feeling lost and feeling lonely and what that looks like, and ultimately what may or may not help, well, I want to share and confess that with you guys because maybe it'll help you as well, or maybe it won't. And you can just laugh at me doing this. That's totally cool as well. But either way, it is a completely like unfiltered, unprofessional type of therapy for me. And it's helping me, and in my eyes, that's a win. And if it helps anyone else as well, that's even more of a win. Because again, I just love to connect with others, and that's what this is all about. So yeah, I've been, kind of to give you the full picture, to really start off, like I kind of started with what I'll call like the brainstorm aspect of it. And I was like, okay, well, right now I moved back home. I'm living at my mom's just kind of while I'm figuring out some things. But, what does that entailed? Well, I've always lived in cities, pretty big size cities. I mean, I've lived in New York City. I've lived in Los Angeles. I lived in Boston. I've lived in Tampa, Florida. I guess that's more a medium-sized city. But, I've lived in cities where, for better or worse, there's this sort of energy about it and sort of this youth about it. And I don't want to come off as an ageist saying that, because I am the biggest believer of age is just a number, and it's how how you feel, how you take care of your body, how you act. You can be forever young and still be responsible and mature. I think all those things can exist at once, and that's something I'm sure we can unpack in a future episode. But yeah, but so just trying to kind of understand that now, living back in the suburbs, for someone like me who, New York was a little too city for me, but then where I am now in the suburbs is too suburb for me. And so it's been a struggle, but I am still not allowing that to stop me. I am trying to, put myself out there, get going, kind of just trying to do the best, because if I, sit at a coffee shop with headphones on, or I sit in the house and just write about being lonely and lost, or podcast about being lonely and lost, but by myself and never with guests or anything, it's not going to solve the problem, right? The problem's going to still exist. I'm not doing anything new. I'm not doing anything to try and change it and make it better. So I said, you know what, Chris? No, you're going to make a change. So what are things you can do? Well, get out of the house. It's an easy one, but I can do it, right? And try different things. And so I kind of also looked back and said, okay, well, when I was in other cities, what worked, what didn't work? How did I meet people? I was very fortunate when I lived in Los Angeles that I went there with one of my best friends from growing up and her friends from college. And so I had kind of a built-in friend group and camaraderie, which was amazing. And I will forever cherish that. And one of the many reasons I endlessly love going to visit LA, to kind of see them and catch up and have that energy, especially because it's what I'm lacking right now. And then I look at something like Tampa, where one of my best friends from work lived. So I had that. But besides that, I kind of was I need to socialize. And so that's where the Meetup app came in. And that's a really good app, and one that I've been using a little bit. It doesn't work as well in the suburbs, I'll notice. I remember in Tampa, they kind of had a 20s and 30s meetup. And again, nothing against age, but right, a lot of times age can kind of factor where you are. I'll be best friends with someone who's 40 or 50, but if they have kids and they're married and they're settled down, it's less about the age and more about we're at very different points in our life. Whereas I might say, oh, let's go play kickball or pickleball and get a drink afterwards, and they got to run home to help their husband or wife with the kids. It's just, I probably could have worded this better, but different points in your life, and that is more apparent as I'm beginning to realize in the suburbs. So while that app worked awesome in Tampa and we met a lot of great people, and we're still friends with some of them, it didn't, I don't want to say it didn't, but it doesn't work as well for me in the suburbs, but I'm trying. There is a couple groups that do go out and they do bingo. They, go do at the bars. They'll go to watch movies or meet up at a coffee shop. So I've been doing that just to get out there. Whether you make a friend or not, even to just get more comfortable putting myself out there, which I think is good. I pride myself on being very extroverted, and I don't know if anyone else felt this way, but I think COVID really ruined me in a sense more than I thought. And I shouldn't say really ruined me. Coffee break. Guys, by the way, coffee, a must always. But I shouldn't say it really ruined me as much as it affected me. Being very extroverted has still been there, but there's times where, while normally I would thrive in an environment where I know no one, and I look at all these strangers and I just think, oh my gosh, I want to know your story. Where are you from? What do you do? How did you get to where you are now? Just tell me all about your life. And I still am that way, but I noticed I would sometimes get more hesitant to do that now. And so, the meetup groups are one of the way I'm just getting out there, even if nothing comes of it other than talking to strangers and hearing their stories, I mean, that is human connection at the end of the day, right? And that is what I'm looking for. So that I highly recommend. It's also great because, especially if you're feeling lost, and, you know, I think what comes with feeling lost is sometimes then you start questioning everything, right? So I'll be like, what are my passions? And question them, which is silly because I love doing this and I love talking with people. But, you know, getting out there, you kind of see what your passions are again. Like, even I want to volunteer at the local theater because while I don't think I could ever be an actor, I always swore that either in my past life or hopefully in my future life, I could be a television host or just host something because I feel like I'd be good. I don't know. Again, I just like the unfiltered kind of yin yang, off the cuff improv banter that comes with hosting. So I really liked that. And I never was the type who was like, oh my gosh, let me go into acting, because I personally don't think I'd be a good actor. But I mean, also, you never know. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go volunteer at the community theater because why not? And maybe it's something I absolutely love, which then that's awesome. Or it's something I don't love as much, but I'm getting out there and interacting with people and getting to meet them, which is just a win either way. So sweet. That's one thing I'm doing. I also, which I guess this is the haha of suburbs, I've used to play tennis growing up. And so I've, of course, picked up pickleball. It's all the rage. And it's oddly a lot of fun. And I totally get why people are into it. I used to laugh at my mom because she plays like twice, sometimes 3 times a week. And like, feels like a cult. Like, she will then go out with her pickleball crew after tournaments and they'll have dinner, they'll have drinks, apps, whatever, but it's very sociable. So I was like, okay, let me do that. And again, I'm all about like, well, 2 things I should preface. One is, you know, I try to communicate things right, but if they ever come out the wrong way, I totally apologize and I try my best to be self-reflective because, again, could go into this in another episode, but right, words matter. What you say and how you say it matters. And we're all going to have times, I feel, we're going to jumble up our words and not mean what we said. So to me, what's more a sign of growth and maturity in someone is that they can realize when maybe they didn't say something the right way, acknowledge it, you know, if necessary, apologize for it, and try and, you know, better explain it. But I don't expect someone to speak perfectly 100% of the time. Like, we're all humans, right? We're going to make mistakes. And I say that to preface this because I have done about like 8 or 9 different pickleball like tournaments and open play now. And it's fun. It's an exercise. It's a workout. So that's great. And, you know, it is talking to strangers. So that's awesome too. But being in the suburbs, it is totally, you know, the social events are more geared towards people in their 50s to 70s, which I'm not there. I will be at some point. And again, I'll be friends with them. But, you know, when they have kids and families and other responsibilities, it's great in the moment for pickleball and social in that aspect. But I guess because I cherish the connection on even a deeper level of let's get coffee, let's get a drink, let's have a deep conversation, let's like vent a little, let's laugh, let's unpack our trauma and chaos and maybe solve it together type of thing. And they're probably like, I want to play pickleball and then I got to go home and bathe the kids or go to sleep because I got to get them to school. Totally, totally cool. But right, like I'm on wavelength A and they're on wavelength B. So just, we're both at 2 different points in our life. So while the pickleball has been fun for the fact of actual playing, it's been, we'll call it kind of a fail in the sense of socializing. And I know pickleball in cities, like I know in Tampa, I know some people who play pickleball in LA and San Diego, and it seems, you know, a more youthful age range, or at least you can find that. So, and I say that just to say, like, you know, if you are someone who's struggling with being lost, feeling lonely, I don't think an environment can fix that, but I also don't think, like, sometimes I feel like, I don't know, I've even been told, well, your problems will follow you, right? Which 100% they will, especially if, like, you haven't worked through certain trauma or you haven't just worked through, certain things in your life. It will 100% follow you. But at the same time, and again, I could be wrong. This is solely my opinion. And honestly, I'd love to be wrong because then I'd get to hear the other side. But for me, I feel, while your environment can't fix everything, it certainly is where you're going to grow, right? So your environment is either going to bring you down or build you up, depending on what you want out of life, right? Like, if you're trying to meet a bunch of people in the finance industry and network, I'd suggest you live in or around New York City. Don't go live in, I don't know, Long Beach Island, New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey, so that was my quick one. But, awesome in the summer. Year round, you're not going to find that. The same way you want to be a country singer, so you want to be in that world and network with those people, I'd say, move to Nashville. And I say it not, saying Nashville is going to solve all your problems, but it is going to be an environment where you can thrive if country is what you want, right? So same thing I've realized is, it's great to be in the suburbs right now and be near family, and close friends are here too, so that's great, and to kind of recharge. But is that the environment where I'm going to grow and flourish, or is it going to be the environment where I feel, maybe like caged a little? And that's taken a lot of deep thought and thinking to kind of, come to the realization one way or another, which for me, I think cities in general, whether big like New York or LA, or medium like, Tampa, Florida, or Nashville, or Austin, Texas, they're going to be more youthful. And I don't even just mean that age-wise, just youthful energy, right? People don't settle down as much. The suburbs, I mean, I get it. Where I grew up, it's great to raise a family. So I totally get why people move here to do that, right? But while people probably move here for multiple reasons, I may be in the minority of, I'm here and I want to socialize and I want to meet people and make friends and build connections and build this podcast and get guests on the show and be around creative people, because I know I'm inspired when I'm around people, and have deep conversations and different thinking. And so I know for me, okay, maybe a different environment could help, right? Won't solve everything. It could solve the loneliness, but again, only if you act on it, right? I could move to New York City and sit in my apartment 7 days a week. And it's the biggest city in the country, right? And that's still gonna not help with loneliness if I'm not getting out and doing. So that's why I said, even where my environment is now, I'm gonna get out and I'm gonna start doing things. And so that's why I've been doing meetup groups, pickleball, trying to think of other things. I mean, I do, at least, even if I'm not talking all the time, I will, like when I'm planning for each podcast episode, I will do it at a coffee shop instead of like a library or my office at home. Because again, I'm around people, conversations strike up, or I even I don't know if I'm weird or normal. Like, I'll look over and see someone, like I saw someone one day on like their iPad drawing something and like writing out, I don't know, it just looked like they were being creative. I don't know what they were doing, but they were being creative, which, if it isn't obvious, I love creativity. So that, I saw that and I was like, hell yeah. And boom, then I looked down at my piece of paper and I have like 3 more episodes for this podcast drafted. Then I'm like, slow down, Chris. Let's get to episode 2 first. But, put yourself in environments that inspire you as well. So I think that helps, and we try our best. And, I'm going to preface this by saying, and you're going to see this as a theme a lot, both when I'm doing these confessionals on my own and when I hopefully have future guests, which I do already have a guest that will be on the show. So I'm planning for that. So look forward to that in either episode 3 or episode 4, but it's going to happen. But I'm going to always say, can I vent for a second? And that is the vent where if you are younger and trying to network, trying to socialize, trying to get out of your bubble, trying to be around just maybe like creative people and worldly people, and this is not everyone 100%, but we'll just say there's a higher likelihood that you're going to meet and be around those people in more of an urban environment, right? And that's just what I need. Like, I love having a car, so I know I'm not a New York City guy, but you can have a car and be in LA, San Diego, Miami, even Jersey City or Hoboken. You can have a car and still get into New York. So, kind of doing those things to figure stuff out. But the suburbs, they're not for me, and that's okay. And they are for, I'm sure, a lot of people, just like they are not for a lot of people. And so I used to be like, they're not for me, and I want to change it. And it's funny because where I live right now and where I grew up is on the beach. So they're building a lot. But they're building a lot, and two things happen. Either they build a lot, and it's like fancy summer homes, which great. So it's people who just come here in the summer, not helpful. Or a lot of towns where I get it, it's more maybe single family homes and people with families, so they don't want their town to change. They fight it. They, go to council meetings. They look for like endangered species. I even learned like of animals that stops a builder. So it's like, okay, now you can't have 60 apartments with a coffee shop underneath, which you can throw hate my way. I love that. But we'll let you have 10 townhomes. And I used to want to go like scream and pull my hair out, like, and really just be like, what the hell? Come on. And then like, again, this is where the self-reflection comes in. I used to say, okay, Chris, what are you really trying to do here? Well, this is a suburb where people go to have a slower pace of life and settle down, and they like their neighborhood character, and maybe they don't want change as much. And like, that's okay. And stop fighting that. And maybe instead think, am I supposed to be in a different environment? And that's what I did, because I was like, why am I getting so upset by this? I am not the town planner and the end all be all. I just, I root for development because I love urbanism, if that's the right word. But, I just really love that. I swear in my next life, I would just like love to be an urban planner. I'm sure there's so much that goes into it that I'd be incapable of, but I'd love to try. But I realized, maybe instead it's just not the environment for you, because you can't always change the environment you're in, right? When people who live there want it a certain way, but maybe you should go to an environment that more aligns with your values and what energizes you and what gets you to, wake up and get out of bed in the morning. And I say all this just to kind of say, if you're doing the soul searching, really listen to yourself. And, when we think, feel, or act certain ways, maybe start questioning ourselves, right? And say why. Like, why do I want all these apartments being built? Because I want to live in a more urban environment. Well, okay, if everyone else here doesn't want that, I'm on the island by myself fighting for this. That's so silly. Go to an urban environment, right? People live in an urban environment for that, and people live in, more small town feels and suburban areas for the quiet. And who am I to change that? So I say all this just to kind of remind you, it's important sometimes to just question why. Why am I thinking the way I'm thinking? Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? And, it's a good starting point. It also leads me to my big thing. And I will totally say, I really, when I was reading Mark Hanson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, one of the chapters really inspired me. And he talked about, because I can't take credit for this, selfishly, I will take credit for the way I understood it, and that is I called it the light switch theory, which I will explain. But he essentially talks about, and this isn't just for like creative things, although I feel like people will most likely connect it to that just because that's readily available, but it's for anything in life. We always wait to be inspired, and then we hope that that inspiration leads to us being motivated so that then we can take the action, right? And that doesn't always work. Great example is this podcast, Confessions of a Lost Soul. I thought about making a podcast, maybe not, the exact title name and stuff, but for years. For years. I'd have, random inspirations. I go through depression, throughout the year, but it always hits really hard in the winter, especially when I'm in a cold place. And so that inspires me. And then I get a little motivated, and then I'll act on it, and I'll write out this great idea and these big things, and then I'll wait for the inspiration to actually do it, right? To record a podcast, to make a silly video, to apply for that job, or to put myself out there and just go to a social event where I know no one, but I never get the inspiration again. And he explains it so well, and it really is that we have it all wrong, right? That inspiration, motivation, action loop. We have it wrong. It's actually action, inspiration, motivation, right? So we need to just act, Don't give a fuck and just act. And once you act, without even realizing it, you're going to be inspired. And then once you have that inspiration that you've been looking for, boom, you're motivated, right? And it is a cycle, but it's a cycle that starts with acting, not sitting there waiting for inspiration to come to you, right? You got to act to be inspired. And that, reading about it, it blew my mind, but then I also understood it. And this is where my light switch theory comes in. Because, right, we can't think of a light switch, right? We flip it on and off. We know on turns the light on, off turns the light off. We can't flip inspiration on all the time, right? We can't decide when we're inspired and when we're not inspired. We can't even decide sometimes when we're motivated and not motivated. And that's why sometimes we will sit on the couch and binge a TV show for 7 hours. And we had to do the laundry, had to get groceries, wanted to read a book, wanted to make a video or write a script or start working on our book and becoming an author or do this podcast. But we don't, because we can't turn motivation on or off. But what can we turn on and off? Action. And there is my light switch theory. There's 3 pieces to that cycle, and we only have a light switch for one: action. It can be off, and I could lay in bed and take a nap, or I can watch like a Harry Potter movie marathon, which especially in November and December, I do not hate. So I already did that, full disclosure. But, right? Or I can turn the action on, and I can get out of bed and go to a coffee shop and start, in my case, drafting my next podcast episode, or get out of bed and go to an event where you meet people and socialize and you get that human connection. And maybe you make a friend, maybe you don't, but you put yourself out there, which the more you do, the easier it gets. It is technically science, but it's common sense. Come on. The more you do something, the easier it gets. And so that is the switch we can flip on and off. And I can perfectly relate it to this podcast, because I'll even be like, okay, I gotta just sit and record it. But then a couple days will go by, right? And then I think, okay, Chris, just flip the action light switch on. Get in front of this mic, start talking with you guys, and all of a sudden, there comes the inspiration, which is probably why sometimes there's venting and rambling and rants in this podcast. And I hope they're entertaining and they help, because it really is. I start doing the act of making this podcast, and all of a sudden I'm inspired. And all these ideas that are dancing all around my head, I want to, for lack of a better word vomit into this microphone. Then I say, Chris, slow down. This is episode 2, not episode 200. Life's a marathon, not a sprint. But it just shows how much it does work, right? You do that action and all of a sudden you will then be inspired and then motivated to do what you've been wanting to do. Sounds silly, but I think it's so important. And so that is where my light switch theory comes in. And it's really, I just applied what he wrote in the book, really just for myself to understand it better, because cycles are great. But like to me, a light switch. Well, what I can turn on and off is in my control. What I cannot turn on and off is not in my control, right? It goes back to the whole saying, we can't control how someone else thinks, feels, or acts, but we control how we think, feel, or act, and we can control how we react because of what they, think, feel, or act. And same thing, because that's the light switch, and so that's the big thing. And it can be scary, right? Especially, the unknown and the fear of failure. It's real, right? But, I've come to really understand that life, and I love this quote, life is about not knowing and doing it anyway. Like I'm sitting here with you guys talking into this microphone. I will fully admit I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyway because talking feels good, venting feels good, it can feel healing, of course, when done the right way. And it helps me even speak my thoughts out loud and navigate this feeling of lost and loneliness. And, obviously, as I continue to do this, I hope I connect with others. And then that really, look at it, it creates this community and this human and social connection. So, yeah, life is about not knowing, but just do it anyway. For better or worse, growing up, I was that kid. A lot of people might weigh the pros and cons and this and that. And I was always that kid when making a decision. I'm like, Chris, you're going to regret the decision, or the thing you don't do, but you're never going to regret doing it and it not turning out well. And that has been like who I am to the core, for better or worse, right? Like, oh, I'm going to go study abroad in London, and I am not going to do the pros and cons of studying abroad. The cost, the emotional stress, maybe the, time difference being in another country and being away from family. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do it because I'd rather 20 years from now say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I lived in London for 6 months. What a hot mess. I'd rather say that than say, oh, I wish I still, at the age of 40, which I'm not 40, but, I'm looking in the future. At the age of 40, I wish I studied abroad in London, or I wish I, moved across the country. I never want to say that. I rather say, oh, I did it. LOL. It was a hot mess, and then laugh about it. And it's so funny and so true, but I think we look back and we smile and appreciate our failures more than our successes, right? Because when you succeed, that's great, but then immediately, a lot of times it's like, okay, well, what's next, or what do I do? But when you fail, you are like, oh my gosh, or at least me, I am like, okay, I failed, but I am not a quitter. So what do I do now? Do I do the same thing but differently? Do I, pull a total 180? It motivates me to keep going. And so that's why, like, I am never afraid to fail. I am just petrified of not trying, which, again, we could unpack that in a whole nother episode of my failures and, my first career and what got me to where I am now, because I am not a psych nurse by trade. I was in the finance world and, didn't like it. Again, can get into it in another episode, but essentially, don't fear failure, fear not trying. You want to act. I know it's scary, but just, you have that light switch, remind yourself that, and flip it on, honestly. Take a big gulp of coffee, to be honest, if you have to. That always gets my light switch on, even when I probably don't want it to be on, but I'm going to do it anyway. You know, and it's the same thing, like we look at failure as such a bad thing, like, right? Like I could say, oh my gosh, I'm lonely and lost. I'm a failure. Like, do I not have friends? Does no one like me? Am I not good at something and that's why I don't have a passion? Am I just like, you know, like kind of like a numb person who's just going through life? And then I, you know, try to be self-reflective, which is a big theme you'll hear a lot. But again, so I ask myself, why are you feeling this way? And, you know, not toxic positivity and some, you know, Buddha saying that is supposed to be awe-inspiring, and we hear it and we go, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever and this is going to change my life. And then you wake up the next day and it means nothing. No, I mean, asking why and like doing real action and being okay. Life is negative and positive, right? Life is not always great, and that's a part of life, and that's okay. And when I say reframe, I say, you know, I'm glad life has sadness and negativity, because then I also know what happiness and positivity is, right? Like I could sit here and say depression sucks, which it does. Depression sucks. But I try to also say like, okay, you know what? I look at this depression and instead of being like, well, this sucks, oh, it's my signal that I got to change something, because I know what it feels like to not be depressed and to be motivated and inspired and energized and enjoying life. And I think loneliness is the same thing. You know, it's not a failure, it's a signal. Okay, I'm lonely, I'm lost. Am I going to curl up into bed and cry? Which you can do. By the way, I am a full proponent of we all need a good cry. You know, I even always say that when I'm like talking with someone, either professionally in therapy or outside. It's like when you want to cry, a lot of people will start crying and then apologize. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, do not apologize. Like, feel your feelings, cry. That's so healthy. Don't keep your emotions in. And it's the same thing. Loneliness, it's not a failure, it's a signal. Okay, something's got to change, right? Whatever you're doing is not working. So take the time to reflect on it and think, what could I do differently? And that's what I've done, and it's helped a lot. I look and I say, okay, pickleball, good example. It's fun, I love it, and it's giving me the exercise and getting me out of the house, but is it giving me the human connection and the possible friendship building that I myself am looking for? No. But I'm not, you know, I still like pickleball, so I'm not going to stop playing, but am I also going to just work, go home and play pickleball and expect the loneliness to go away? No. Ding ding, Chris, we're going to try other things too, right? We're going to go to coffee shops. We're going to go to meetups. We're going to volunteer at the local theater. Maybe we'll even be in a community play. I mean, hey, you never know. I'm all about trying new things, again, for better or worse. But right, I'm going to do something different, because if I keep doing the same thing, nothing's going to change. And I think that's important. And I think that's where, like, in these episodes, I'll sometimes say, you know, I'm sorry, but if you don't mind, I'm going to vent for a second, right? Because the venting helps too. And I think venting can have a bad connotation where people think, oh, you're complaining. But, and I used to even think that, but then I will vent. I've had friends vent to me. I've had family members vent to me. I've had strangers vent to me. And collectively, we all agree we feel better afterwards. And I mean respectful venting, not cursing, screaming, pulling out your hair venting, but like, I have this problem or I'm going through this feelings and it's, you know, life feels chaotic and I just want to blurt it out and word vomit it up. And, you know, would you be a listening ear and would you listen actively and actually hear me and not just go, oh damn, but really, really listen? And then it's like, wow, I feel so much better. So and I'm sure there's a science behind it, probably something I should look into more. But right, venting can help because, right, if we're silent with our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, it just makes the spiral worse, right? We spiral in our head. We don't let it out. We don't hear it out loud, which I think when we hear it out loud, it changes the way we look at things and we start being, solution based instead of just, woe is me, nothing's ever better, this is life, it's just how it is, I have to be miserable and just go through the motion. No, say it out loud and try and get your thoughts to change, right? Another big thing is right, life is always about problems. So you're always going to have problems in life. And the goal is hopefully we have good problems, right? If we have good problems and good failures, that motivates us to keep going, right? It motivates us to be energized and to flip on the light switch and to act. And that once we act, boom, then we're inspired. And with that inspiration becomes the motivation to do what we want, make the changes we want if we want to change, grow if we want to grow, get that new job or try that new creative outlet, write that book, make that podcast, even audition for that play or for that TV show if they're auditioning in your area, whatever it may be, or go back to school and get a degree in a career you want, it's all part of that. And I think that's so important. And it's something I'm doing. And, a lot of times, it gets me to then look back and be like, okay, well, what works and what doesn't work? The same way I used to say, okay, well, what makes you feel good and what doesn't make you feel good? Or I should say, what makes you feel good for a minute and what makes you feel good for an hour, right? Because life is going to be peaks and valleys, highs and lows. You won't know what the high's like if you never have the low, right? And when we have a high, we enjoy it, we're in the moment, we love it. And when we're kind of down more on the low, that's our signal. Okay, something's not working. Let's figure it out. And that's where for me, I'm like, okay, this podcast, for instance, I love doing this. Sometimes I'm not motivated to sit down, but the second, again, I flip that light switch on and I act, all of a sudden, all these words and thoughts come to me and I am like, holy crap, I just talked for 45 minutes. But yesterday, I was sitting on the couch saying, I have no idea what to talk about. And I don't know if I should do this because, maybe no one wants to hear what I'm saying and maybe I have nothing to share. But then when I act, I'm like, oh my gosh, even now, I already have so many other thoughts, but I don't want to topic jump. Try and keep episodes a little consistent. Unless, when we have a guest, hey, no topics off limit. But, for you guys in these confessionals, I'd rather kind of keep it at least a little bit in theme, which is why I write stuff down to keep myself accountable. But, and that works for me, going out to happy hour or going on a hike or going to a coffee shop with a friend and talking, that's awesome for me. And I am happy for hours, not minutes. Buying that new computer, buying a fancy wallet or getting a new car, that's cool too. Love it. Probably still feel a little bit of happiness, but that lasts minutes, not hours, and also costs much, much more. I'm going to go with what I enjoy more, which thankfully for me, well, you do need to spend money whenever you go out, right? But, that I like. I don't need a private jet and a mansion or a Lamborghini to feel happy, thankfully, or else I would probably be a very depressed, miserable person all the time because, what are the odds of getting a private jet or a Lamborghini? But having friends, finding friends, making social connection, getting out of the house and talking and having deep, thought-provoking conversation, that is awesome that is within my power, right? As I'm realizing, it doesn't happen easy. It's a lot of work and it still hasn't happened for me, but that's why you're on that journey with me and why I like to share what works and what doesn't work. And at least what's making me proud of myself is I am putting myself out there. I am not being afraid of failure. I'm not being afraid of judgment. And I'm finally learning too that I can't wait for the inspiration to come to be motivated to then act. I am learning that I am just flipping on that light switch and I am acting. And then the inspiration and motivation will follow. And if I could leave you with anything in that episode, it is that, which again, I can't take credit for. It is in, which I also highly recommend, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Hansen. But what I will take credit for is how I understood it, which is my light switch theory. You can flip the switch on and off for action. You cannot do that for inspiration or motivation. So act. And you know what? If you're struggling to flip that switch on, just remind yourself, life is not about knowing and doing it anyway. Honestly, I really debate getting tattooed on my arm, like fake it till you make it, because I say that all the time. Like people will be like, how do you do something? And I'm like, I don't know, fake it till you make it. Because, looking back, like school does teach us a lot, right? But we can study and we can make flashcards and we can learn. But then we go to a job and we're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I didn't learn any of this in school. But then you're at that job for 2 years and you're like, oh my gosh, I learned so much, right? Because the action part is where we actually learn. So do the action, be okay to fail, get back up and do it again anyway, or do something else if you didn't enjoy it. But if you love what you do and you still feel you're failing at it, don't give up, keep going. With social media, we see so many people's successes, but we don't see their failures. Like, we see a hit song and we go, oh my gosh, they made that song and it blew up and how cool. But yeah, you're not going to see the maybe 5 to 10 years and the hundreds of failed songs that no one listened to. And maybe them being like, a server or bartender to pay the bills while they try, right? We see the successes, not the failure. But the failures are arguably more important and they define us more. So if I can leave you with anything for today's episode, it's, exactly that. Don't be afraid of failure. Instead, welcome it. Be afraid and try anyway. Don't know what you're doing and still do it. And remember my light switch theory and that cycle. You can turn on the light switch to act. And I promise you, once you act, you will be inspired and you will be motivated. And then from there, you just keep going. And you know what? Life is hard sometimes. Life is ridiculous sometimes. Like I just sometimes laugh and I go, oh my gosh. But then I say, you know what? Another corny thing, but right, you've survived 100% of your past days. So you're going to survive this too. And you are going to make it through. And if you ever struggle with that, you reach out to someone you can trust in and you talk and you work through it. And I'd like to believe, we're all humans and we are all here for each other at the end of the day. And, we just want to do our best, right? We're all trying to figure out this life thing and feeling lost and feeling lonely and where we belong in this world. And, I feel like I lack community and I feel like I'm lacking deeper connection. And how do I fix that? And what do I do? And again, like I've done, you can sit there and just think on repeat. You can even go to the coffee shop, have a nice strong cold brew, and you can write down all these awesome things. But unless you act, nothing will change and it won't matter. So thank you for coming today to Confessions of a Lost Soul with me, Christopher James. I will see you again next Tuesday morning. Honestly, if I was being honest, I hope no one is listening, but I am not afraid of failure. I am not afraid of embarrassment. And I am not afraid of being honest and being vulnerable and putting myself out there. So you know what? I'm really proud to say that while part of me hopes no one is listening, there's also a part of me that hopes everyone is listening. And that's really freaking cool. And that makes me really proud of myself. So until next week, I hope you guys have an awesome week. Let's connect. Let's build this community. Reach out. I'd love to have you on the show. I'd love to hear your story. Until next time.